Guys, welcome back. I've got Brian Foley on again. His sound is now locked and loaded, so we're ready to go. The question that I thought would be really interesting for us to talk about today is a very, very simple question, and that's what is good? In terms of an athlete in the sport of fitness, what does good mean? And so he and I are just going to go back and forth for a couple of minutes on what this thing means, because I think a lot of people want to be good and have no concept of what good even means. So Brian, let me just kind of throw it in your direction for a second. How would you view what good means?
So good to me would be a holistic view of someone, okay? And we can let's take the sport, and you're at the top. I'm gonna look at an individual, their success in a long-term scale, okay? So if you're one and done, that's not good to me. One and done meaning, did you punch it to sanctionals? Did you go to the games? Did you show face and then you disappeared? That's not good to me. That's a fluke, or we'll leave it there. It's a fluke to me. And when you get into looking at good, I go past what their track record says, and I also look at their all-around skill level and where all of that sits. Okay, so let's just say they're at the top, and they're at a games level. I'm not only looking at, okay, what the hell are they doing there? I want to see all of their data. I want to see all of what they do, and I also am going to look at what type of person they are. And I actually gravitate towards like genuinely good people, and I classify them as good because they can perform well and then they represent well. So I combine the two with kind of making the humanistic element and implementing that.
How much of your definition of good is external facing, meaning like how they place or something, as compared to internal facing, meaning how good they feel about where they are? Or is that even part of the definition? Some people would say it's only about ones and zeros and wins and losses. But where would you sort of place those two things?
Yeah, I'd say in the context of competing, it is numbers, just plain and simple. And that is a clear definition of good, is if the numbers are. And I think that's where the data conversation comes into play, right? Where I think that's the first classification of good, right? The data. And then you go sub-layer to that. You look at the history of that athlete. And then you go into the internal. I mean, you could, if you knew the athlete enough and you knew this internal representation of how they felt and what was their purpose and alignment and how everything was going in an inside process. On the outside, it may look great, but on the inside, it might be a completely different story. And I think you can definitely incorporate that. But how my brain works, I go from numbers and then I investigate further past that first initial screen.
So define for me, let's initially start with a male athlete. Okay. Define, and you and I are going to start talking about KPIs, I'm sure. So just if you guys have never heard of KPI, that's a key performance indicator. What are some of the numbers or KPIs that you think that an athlete would need to achieve to be good?
So we can take a male snatch number, and for me, I'd say 265 and 275. And this isn't a one and done, right? Again, track record. Hey, if we warm you up and we go hard today, are you hitting that? Yes. Okay, great. And the reason why I classified that as a top ceiling to say, okay, this is good, is because I know that I can work with all of the numbers and load prescriptions they're going to have to go through in a mixed modal environment, right? Or a competitive environment there. And a lot of the weights we see will end up being within a 70% or beneath that range, right? So they can do that, and then they're also going to be able to perform and actually excel within competitions.
So to clarify, you're saying that they need to snatch, we'll just call it 275, because when they go into a fast-paced, multi-rep, multi-set environment, it's a low enough percentage for them to continuously get back to the bar and pick it up again and again and again and again.
Exactly, right?
Okay.
And And within that, because they can do that, you have training principles that you can plug in there, right? Barbell cycling skills. There's so many things and there's so many ways you can split that tree. But having that ceiling allows for so much more freedom for, I would say, creativity and training, and just allows you to expose yourself to pretty much every scenario you're going to be in instead of being limited by that top number.
I know a little bit about being limited by that top number, just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, right. The challenge was always suffering, right? Just to get there. And it was, all right, try to reach that when it gets to that height. And now it becomes play. It becomes a little bit more fun.
What are some other numbers that you think are really important? And open it up to either male or female.
Okay. Muscle ups on broken sets. Male or female, I like to see 15 plus. Male, 20 plus. This is just a non-fatigue set. They can bust those out. And again, what does that do? It allows for a big ceiling and allows us to work at 50% ranges and underneath that and use that in training. And then also build capacity and muscle endurance and then that skill.
Have you seen that people with big unbroken sets have better general muscle endurance, at least for upper body pulling, than others? Or have you seen vastly different second sets? Meaning, like, if somebody could do a set of 20 and then rest 10 seconds and do a set of 10, do you see that much less than people doing 20 and then 4? Like, where is good in relation to that muscle endurance, quasi CP battery type stuff?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the initial would be the 15 and 20, male, female. And then secondly, yes, the battery is super important, right? You can't do 20 and then do 1, and recoverability aspect. And so a good test for that, you can do 30 for time. Mm-hmm. And up front, you do a max unbroken set. And then what's great is because now that so if you're a male and you come off the rings, we'll use female, we've been talking to male a lot. So female comes off at 15, right? That's halfway. And now they have to figure this out. Okay, how many am I going to do? Am I going to do 5, 4, 3, 3, hang on, go? Am I going to stick to these sets that I planned out? And honestly, the test is great because, there's athletes that can get into the 20 range and then do it in 3 minutes, right? And that puts this big intensity aspect in it because you have to do it under that time frame to be the top. And that's when you truly find, where capacity sits. Where's the battery? Where's the aerobic system? And also, like, how do athletes, handle this in the mental game? How do they process and organize, like, oh my gosh, I have 4 left, but I only can do singles, and they're staring at the rings. Yeah. So there's those situations that are really unique to see.
I definitely want to come back to the mental game in a second, so keep that in your mind. I'm curious on longer aerobic pieces. Like, what are some of the long tests that you might look for to define somebody as good?
I like a 60-minute row, and just a personal experiment on there is I want to try to expand this over time in the future to maybe say 100 minutes on the row for max meters. And what's great there is it shows capacity. Well, it's aerobic capacity. This is a skill you need to have. You need to be super efficient on that, right? So if you're not efficient on a 60-minute row, you're going to break down quickly. And that fatigue curve is going to rise a lot higher than it should in order for this test to work properly. And for males, you do a dry score, and you would take like 15,000 meters would be like a number to shoot for males. And I believe I don't have the data in front of me, but females are right underneath that. And there's some females out there that are doing male scores. So it really comes down to the essence of those athletes and what's good. But that 14,000, 15,000 dry weight score before you do any weight calculations or weight variability in there, that's a good marker to go for. And you got a rope capacity, that's one that you're monitoring. But right underneath that, you're going to see where they're limited in. Is it bending, quad endurance? Pulling endurance. You get notes for days. You'll start here cramping, right? And all of these things are just indicators that there's not a capacity built for that.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, obviously there are other tests, but we kind of hit on a strength test, a muscle endurance, and a gymnastics test, and an aerobic test. So let's just kind of put that into a package right now. Let's go to the mental game. What do good athletes generally show that lesser athletes don't?
The ability to future pace.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Athletes that we'll take two different individuals, someone who has the ability to have this self-awareness and are slightly conscious to know what's ahead of them. They're going to have to break something up. You know, say this is a 20-minute piece. They're going to automatically know internally, I'm going to have to do some strategies to get through this. Whereas there are individuals that look at the numbers in 20 minutes and their perception is as many reps as possible, go. And there is a clear line of, at least in my experience, there is two types, right? You have in between, there's multi-layers you can get into there, but those who can just grab onto that and being like, look, it is the sustain game, right? You have to learn that before you can do any of this, because otherwise you're just suffering all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to learn that way. Well, you learn how to suffer well. I did, which was great. But I didn't like suffering. So that was also I always knew when I was going to go too much suffering, so I'd back off. But luckily I'd organized training to get volume, so where I was decent enough to be able to navigate through those scenarios, right? And you know, I come from I was surrounded by really good athletes for majority of my training. And you could clearly see the ones that knew what was going on, right? Or if we were doing 3 workouts in a day, you could see those athletes be able to go, oh, okay, I know what I'm going to do. You could see they'll naturally hold back. Whereas you have the unconscious unknowing that just go, right? Well, which may not be a bad thing in essence as well.
Oh, for sure. I think that everybody's got a little bit different internal, drive set, but
right.
It is interesting to think, I think that you're seeing this more and more and more and more at the top. There are still some athletes that just always seem to come out too hot and can't hold it, but the great athletes more and more, they're opening with 5 muscle ups. They're opening with 3 deadlifts at 225. It's like, what? And then all of a sudden you recognize, oh, they have 175 deadlifts left. It's like, oh, okay, now I can understand what you mean. So, but you're saying future pacing is happening almost every moment of a workout. It's not just up front. It's like, that last rep felt a little bit hard. Instantly my body's like, that's too hard. I better shut it down a little bit. Okay. And that is, can that be taught?
Yeah, I think that can be taught, definitely. But that's, if you're taking someone that doesn't have that and you want to teach them that, it just takes tons and tons of practice, right? Where one, they build the ceilings to their maximums and get them up to a level that's quote unquote good for us. And then we can get all of the numbers underneath that and start organizing and raising the capacities with underneath there so they can organize and play in the sport.
Interesting. Okay, last question for you. I get that this is different for everybody and it doesn't necessarily directly correlate to winning, but what would you say that generally speaking, good athletes do outside of the gym?
Log their food, get 8+ hours of sleep, and don't fuck around on the weekends.
All right, let's call it right there, Foley. I really appreciate you coming on, man. Hopefully you guys picked up some good insights. Certainly we're going to keep talking about a lot of these KPIs and numbers as we go, but appreciate you coming on, Brian. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Later.